Welcome to another episode of A Pint with Seaniebee. Thank you all for your shares and continued support of the podcast. I think it's guests like we have today that are getting your attention and getting the interest going. I'm coming to you today from Sarajevo in Bosnia Herzegovina. We rarely hear about all that's happening in this city, in this country that's rebuilding itself after a traumatic end of the last century. And we certainly don't hear much about the advertising industry here. My guest today is Amer Mrz. This is my 8th attempt at saying that surname, and every time I get it slightly wrong, but he's been very patient with me.
It's getting better.
It's getting better. Amer is a art director at Fabrica. Fabrica is, and I'd urge you to take a look at their website, very professional. They are one of the biggest independent local Bosnian advertising agencies, and Amer is their art director, and he has been with them 17 years.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. I met Amer 2 nights ago at the launch of something that he's doing independent of his day-to-day job. You're doing a master's.
Yes. First I have to apologize to your audience for my English. I probably sound like East European villain from the movies.
That's why he's on the podcast.
That was fun stuff that I was doing for my master degree, for my education on Academy of Fine Arts, and that was the rebranding of History Museum of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which resulted in that exhibition of new visual identity and posters that were done as a communication material for that museum.
I was at the launch of this show that was put on the other night at the History Museum of Sarajevo, and Amer produced a series of very, I think, quite challenging posters with very provocative imagery and kind of tempered with quite important and intriguing quotes from famous people.
Yeah.
Give me an example of one of the posters that you did.
History never looks like history when you're living through it. Is done combined with the sign, "Watch out, sniper." That was part of our iconography during the war. There was probably the only place in the world at that time. Now it's reality probably in Syria. We had almost the traffic signs that were saying that were pointing at the direction of snipers. So one of items which are in that museum is that sign. So I created. Basically, you have to be aware of first of the history of that museum. It is formed by former communist authorities in order to glorify socialist revolution, partisan struggle, communist party,
right.
And it served that purpose for 40 years. So it was very
propaganda.
The propaganda institution. You saw that building. It was one of the masterpieces of modern architecture. So it served that purpose for 40 years. After first democratic elections, that place was forgotten.
So it's very hard for those listening to have any conversation with anybody in Sarajevo or Bosnia without referring to the war, and Amer will talk a little bit about that later and his experiences in it. But we've ended up in a situation where the country itself is pretty much at peace, and there are 3 primary ethnicities, I guess is the word here. There's Bosniak, which would be Bosnian Muslims, is that correct?
Yes.
Then we have Bosnian Serbs.
Yes.
And we have Bosnian Croats.
Yes.
They all speak the same language, although they call it different things. And this was the 3 types of people who were all fighting viciously against each other in the 90s. And now they have a new system of government where they change. One of the leaders becomes the leader every 4 years. So this museum is more of a Bosniak museum, is it?
It has that image, but it is a museum which really represents the history of the whole Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Right.
The majority of the items there belong to the period of Second World War, but it also has a lot of documents that witness the founding of the Bosnia as a state.
Right.
For example, that was very emotional for me when I found it in their basement. It's called Postcards from the concentration camp Jasenovac. It's literally the cards which prisoners have ability to send to their families. Usually they contain words like send me food or send me some clothes. That was privilege to political prisoners at Jasenovac concentration camp, not for Jews. But in each word of those postcards you can see the struggle to stay alive. So you can't convince me that those cards belong to any of the ethnicities in Bosnia. It's just human stories.
Amer is in his mid-40s like myself. I said that because he's actually a bit younger than me. But he was a young man when war broke out. Tell me what it was like in the period maybe before the war. What was it like growing up in former Yugoslavia, and you know what it was like for you as a kid?
Well, now you have a situation when older people are very nostalgic about those times in former Yugoslavia. Young people don't remember it. I remember only fun stuff, you know. I remember football league. I remember Olympics.
Yugoslavia at the time had a great soccer team.
Yeah, exactly. My football team, Željo, was in semi-finals of UEFA Cup. So we had great soccer, we had great movies, great music, and so on. So some people are feeling nostalgic about that. Myself, I was in high school when the war broke out.
So Yugoslavia was sort of the western, one of the western fronts for the Eastern Communist bloc. Okay, it fell apart probably when the Berlin Wall came down in the late 80s. But you know, the whole of Yugoslavia is a sort of an amalgam of what is now 7 different countries. But at the time there was no sense of that, or was there?
Yugoslavia was never part of that Iron Curtain. It was never part of Warsaw Agreement. People here were not stuck like in other Eastern countries. We had a passport and ability to travel wherever we wanted.
Okay.
We had a socialist government which was run by one political party, Communist Party. During the 80s you could form your own company. We had private ownership.
So it would be more like China now, say?
Let's say like a China now.
Right, okay.
Like a China now.
Right. But at the time, as a kid, there was no sense of any of the trouble that was going to come. Like, you didn't know who... There was no
especially from my point of view, you know, I come from a family which was never into politics. No one was ever part of Communist Party, you know. Yeah. The mixture of the population guaranteed that nothing like that could ever happen, and imagine the surprise when it all happened. It wasn't happened during the night. There were wounds that lasted from World War II.
But it goes back to your quote about you don't understand history when you're living through it.
Yeah, exactly.
So all this is happening, and now you look back and go, holy crap, that was
exactly. I mean, there was a war around us, and we didn't realize the importance of the moment. When you're living through it, it's just a struggle to live another day.
Yes.
Now, from this distance, it looks like we've written history, you know.
So just briefly, things like the whole country fractured open. Slovenia became the first to break away. Governments of Radic and Milosevic, is that right, in Croatia, and Serbia. They were kind of at odds, the two big countries. Serbia wanted to take dominant power. In the middle was Bosnia, full of some Serbs and some Croats, so the whole thing descended to civil war. There was literally the last, well, apart from maybe South Sudan, the last ethnic cleansing stroke genocide happened here. It will be a blight on the European countries like my own country, Ireland, like the EU, as to the inaction. There was terrible atrocities at Srebrenica that went past Dutch soldiers of the UN. There was just a whole pile of atrocities. I don't really want to go into them too much, but suffice to say the whole country disintegrated, and it got really, really nasty. Sarajevo itself is a city that's based in a sort of pudding bowl, is surrounded by kind of smallish mountains, and literally the people of Sarajevo during the siege of Sarajevo were stuck in the middle of the city and couldn't get out and were being shot at by snipers from on high. and a lot of people lost their lives. So it was a mess. You joined the army at the time?
Yeah, I was.
What was that like?
18. Not fun.
I bet it wasn't fun. Yeah. Were you surprised you survived?
Well, at that time you're not living, you're not thinking about it. Maybe now from a distance when I'm thinking about it, I was couple of times, a dozen of times, so close to that I wonder how I survived. And it's not just my story. Every citizen of Sarajevo was at some point faced with near-death experience during that war, Think of that days, I'm surprised. But when you're living, like that quote, when you're living through it, especially when you're living it during the period of 3.5 years, a couple of months more, then it becomes your reality. You just don't think about it. You are surprised when you see traffic light on TV that works.
Well, just from my memory. So I would have been in Ireland then. Again, you're living through it just as a person watching TV, and here's the latest country that's going mad. But there were these evocative pictures of people running across streets trying to get loaves of bread to their house and getting shot at, like clearly civilians, like young girls, young boys. I talked to a lot of my friends about it who are, some of my friends who are here, and really there's a sort of a embarrassment. And I think the rest of Europe will look back, particularly the French, Dutch, UN, a lot of it was just I don't think I'm not sure what would happen now, because I think that what's missing from that time is the internet, and I think the whole world would have just got around this a lot quicker than it did, because inactivity and lack of knowledge, right, was one of the major problems.
When it started, you had that feeling that you are on the right side, that you're fighting for the right thing, and you have impression that whole world is talking about Bosnia. It took us a lot of time to realize that no one gives a damn about that. Everyone in the world was living its own lives. And I especially realized that during, let's say, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria crisis. It's just like it is,
Most people just want to ignore it. It's too depressing or whatever,
That was our reality, At some point, you get used to run, not to be hit by a sniper. At some point, during 3.5 years, it's normal for you to go to find water, to find food, to go on the front line. You just used to do that.
Yes. Eventually the war finished, and as usual in these situations, there was a cobbled together peace process led by Madeleine Albright, the Americans, Daytona Agreement, etc. Anyway, that was 20 years ago. What happened to you after the war finished? You left the army presumably, and how was what was it like getting back on your feet, as not just yourself but as a city?
Well, I was part of the army like all the other Bosnians. Your audience can't see it, but you can witness that I'm not usual Rambo type of guy. I look nothing like professional soldier. So after war ended, we all went to our usual routines. I was always fascinated by graphic design, by comics, especially by commercials. For some reason, I always liked commercials. When others were leaving during commercial breaks, I was always watching them. I was always fascinated. I was always fascinated by shining images and so on. So I applied to Academy of Fine Arts, studied there for 4 years, successfully finishing it. And one of my professors, Bojan Hadžihalilović, who is founder of Fabrika Advertising Agency, called me, and we started this cooperation which lasts for 17 years.
Wow. What was it like in the city, those first months, weeks, when you were presumably wondering if it was going to hold because it was rickety, right?
Yeah. After 3.5 years, you don't believe it. Exactly. Yeah. When it started, you live under the impression it is going to end every day. Any day, yes. Yeah. When it stopped, at some point you have impression that it will never stop. When it stopped, you can't believe it.
Yes.
You can't believe it. You think it's very fragile. So it took us time to get into this peace routine.
Yeah.
It took us, let's say,
a year.
A year probably.
Yeah.
You know, we had a curfew. It was until 9. So after the peace was signed, we had a curfew, I think, for 1 year.
Amazing. And so the Fabrica company, tell me a little bit about where that came from, like how that set up.
It was originally founded, I think, in 1984.
Okay.
But wasn't active until 1997, I think, when it was opened again. And from that time, it functions like a full-service advertising agency with media department, web department, graphic design, and video production.
Okay. And I'm sure advertising is one of the last things to start coming back after a war situation. Sorry, I'm a bit jaundiced, I'm a bit cynical about advertising.
Yeah.
Was it difficult to justify? I'm in advertising, or was that part and parcel of this rebuilding that we talk about?
Yeah, I wasn't part of the agency when those first steps were made.
Yeah.
But I know the stories about how they had to persuade clients, to educate clients about the importance of advertising. At first, with the end of the war, rebuilding started, so there was a need for a lot of poster promotional materials for different actions.
Yes.
After that came first mobile devices, first refreshment drinks. Coca-Cola rebuilt its factory in Sarajevo. First companies were started, and we were sort of one of the first agencies that started.
I remember my friend Amla, who she's Bosnian from Sarajevo as well, and she said to me years ago, she said, "Oh, McDonald's will never come to Sarajevo, and neither will Starbucks, because the Bosnian fast food is so much better." And I said, "I bet you it will within 5 years." She goes, "No, it won't. I won't be allowed in." And so we had a bet by 2000. Sure enough, McDonald's have 2 branches here, but they had more, which have closed down. But but I suppose that gives a confidence back to the city in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah, I share your opinion. I mean, there's fast food literally every corner of Sarajevo, and burek, cevapcici, and so on are in our tradition.
So cevapi is like a sausage meat with pita bread. It's delicious. And it's much cheaper, right? Because McDonald's is expensive
much
here.
cheaper,
Yeah.
So it was sort of a joke. McDonald's could never function here because
it's like a treat. McDonald's is like going out for a fancy meal.
Yeah, and I think we are one of the last countries which hosted McDonald's.
Still no Starbucks.
No Starbucks.
Yeah.
No Starbucks. I don't know. I'm probably the only Bosnian that likes Starbucks. I know. When I go abroad and I said to Bosnians, I would like to go and drink Starbucks coffee, they look at me like, why?
So the coffee here is like more like a Greek coffee, like it's a sandy kind of shot.
Like traditional, most of the coffee is traditional Italian espresso.
Yeah.
And we have that cult of, we call it Turkish coffee. I don't know which, because the Turks drink tea. Yeah. Let's call it Balkan tradition,
Okay.
We have that cult of coffee. It's whole ritual.
Right.
When Bosnian is drinking coffee, it's not like 5-minute coffee.
Yes.
It's hour and a half.
Yes. Okay.
Everything stops. He drinks his coffee for hour and a half. It's part of social ritual.
Yeah. So you talk about these social rituals, and there's a lot of cultural stuff. So when the country reformed, or when the peace came, there were still 3 ethnically different groups, and there still are today, making up the whole country. How did things like the music culture, the culture of storytelling, culture of food, did that start to gel back together a bit, or has it kept distant?
I think that all habits have never disappeared. Music that was good during 80s, during former Yugoslavia, continued to be great even after the war.
Yes.
Popular singers or musicians first started to visit other countries. That cooperation started almost immediately. The economy started its cooperation. So the only thing where we stuck is politics.
Yeah. So politics here is as I said earlier, every 4 years a different prime minister representing one of these three primary ethnic peoples comes to power. And so the problem they're having is you're only in for 4 years, you try and do something and then you get replaced by somebody else who then comes in with a different agenda, and meanwhile nothing really gets done, right?
Yeah.
Or everything gets half done. What about sport?
Sport unified very quickly, you know. The major sport here is football. At first it started with 3 different leagues: Bosnian League, Serb League,
Really?
Bosnian League. Yeah, but the thing is, Bosnian League, which was recognized by FIFA, by UEFA. When you are recognized by FIFA and UEFA, you had that ability to go into UEFA Cups. UEFA doesn't recognize ethnic leagues.
Okay.
So they quickly realized if we want to go out, if we want to play European matches, we have to be part of Bosnian League. So
okay.
it was...
Talks again.
Yeah, money talks. And some of the Serb players, if they have opportunity, and Croat players, if they have, during past 2 decades, if they had ability to play for Croatia or for Serbia national teams, they chose them. But that things are changing, and now today our team is mixture of all ethnicities, you know.
Good old sport.
Good old sport.
Do you feel like there's a chance that eventually the government may follow suit, or do you think we're stuck in this quagmire?
I think we are stuck.
Yeah,
I think we are stuck because most of the people don't see alternative.
Yeah.
You know, if we see alternative how we can solve it, we would vote for them.
Yeah.
But there are some lights that it's very hard to change old habits in Bosnian culture, you know. Each time the elections come, national parties are playing that national card.
It can't be helpful.
You know, they raise tensions.
Yes. And you feel like you have to vote for them?
So they mobilized its voters during elections. After they vote, you have
it seems like a system,
another 4 lost years.
Yeah, and it also seems like a system that every 4 years you're reminded about your ethnicity and encouraged to vote for it, which is silly. It's just silly.
It's a silly thing.
So Bosnia Bosnia and Sarajevo the Bosniaks are primarily Muslim. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how the city and the country feels about the rise of Islamicism, what's going on in Syria, how much of a threat, because of course people like ISIS, their first enemy are apostate Muslims, and again the Islam that's practiced in Bosnia is very tolerant and is very accepting of other people, and there's absolutely no sort of bigotry that I can see anyway. So how do you feel here about that as a sort of a country?
You can witness how Bosnia works, what kind of Islam this is. All of the Bosnians don't support
Islamism.
Well, they are jihadism, and they don't support. I think they are very angry because it's called Islamic fundamentalism. It has nothing to do with Islam.
Right.
It's like calling Catholic terrorism because of the IRA or I don't know. Yeah. It's bad people doing bad things.
Is there not a case to be made, though, that the ISIS in particular is religious zealotry, is really demanding that Islam goes back to the 800s and goes back to the time, that goes back to the basic principles. So, I think Al-Qaeda and some of the other ones are more about power and oil and stuff, but this one seems to be very much religious. I mean, again, you're right. If some Catholic sect suddenly started going back to the Bible, which is equally violent in places that we sweep under the table and know it's not right, but there is that little element to it which is a bit disturbing, no?
You can see that people here are more into this modern kind of Islam, which you can see in Turkey, for example.
Egypt.
Egypt, exactly. We are trying to build a secular country. We still feel the wounds of the of the war that was here 20 years ago. What happens there is very far from us.
Yeah.
People here are stuck in their own problems, in their own politics, in their own struggle for existence, and they don't feel the crisis, which is evident. Probably, if there are attacks in Bosnia, we will be more cautious about threat of it. But people here are more into its own problems. No one really thinks so much about crisis in.
Well, on this trip I've been to Muscat, and then I went to Dubai, then Istanbul, and now here, and I've been to Cairo before. But yeah, there is this, they're probably some of the better cities and places that I visited, from a ability to have conversations, ability to talk about secularism, modernism, about live and let live, all the things that we need to talk about. And, again, there's hysteria in the West, and particularly in America. So anyway, that thing will rumble on. But I hear you. I mean, I was more interested in whether if ISIS started targeting Istanbul or Cairo because they're more moderate, if that was a threat. You got married.
Yeah.
And you have a baby.
Yeah. Exactly.
Tell me about that bit. That's the positive bit.
That was the positive bit. Yeah. I have a 2-year-old and a wife of my life.
Great.
It's a whole new experience. I'm expecting new baby at October.
Okay.
That will be fun. I know it sounds pathetic, but I found new meaning of life. Before that, I was very angry when I had a misprint, or I couldn't find idea for a good ad. Yeah. Now I think that was.
It's not important.
It's not important. Yeah. I found some new meaning of.
There's a great part of the whole story that is the children. Right, which is the future of this country, and hopefully it's a bit like Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. The new generation is what will hopefully get taught differently. How do you feel, given the new arrivals in your life and the new responsibilities? Do you feel confident about the future? Pessimistic, optimistic?
Well, depending on the day, I have mood swings depending on the day. I'm very frightened about their future, especially in Bosnia, because of the whole situation.
So you still have a feeling it might go off again? Or is it more?
My fears are about economic reasons, safety reasons, and so on. There's a say, I don't know who said it, that every 50 years there's a new war in Balkans. So I had mine. Probably if that realizes, my son will have one, and that frightens me.
Yes.
When you go through Balkan history, that's
Sarajevo, of course, was where Franz Ferdinand was shot.
Yeah.
To start the First
World War. If you go through Balkan history, you realize that is true. I'm very frightened about the economy. I'm very frightened about, again and again, people here don't think about ISIS, Middle East, and so on. We have our own problems. Yeah. Exactly. We don't have global problems here. There's a joke. Even economic crisis won't harm us because we are in crisis all the time.
What about the positive pieces about it? I mean, you just said you have found a new reason to live, the apple of your eye. So there's this element. And what are the positive pieces about the future?
Positive pieces are coming on everyday basis. When he looks at you, when he smiles at you, when there's certain
words he says,
when my football team wins, and so on. So there are positive steps. We are frustrated that they don't go faster. It goes very slowly. Again and again, there's a quote that ironic quote that Bosnians are usually telling. It's good while we don't shoot, while there's no war. Everything is better than
times.
Everything is good.
Just don't fight.
Don't fight. when economy doesn't work, okay, at least it's not war.
Yes.
When there's something else, at least there's no war.
It's perspective, yeah.
Yeah.
And everything.
So when you look at things from that perspective, it's great.
This is maybe a hard question, but just to finish, what would you, looking back, say to your younger self at 16 or 17 before it all took off? What would you have said? Get out of the country, leave? What would you have said to yourself?
I'm not sure. At that age, I was young. I wanted.
Fearless.
No, I wasn't fearless.
Right.
I wasn't fearless. The thing is, when the war started, we all had, like you, certain perspective about war that comes from movies. At the beginning of war, the city was full of Rambo type of guys, that were going through the city with guns, with the sunglasses, muscles, and so on. But on the front line, the real bravery, come from most unexpected persons, from ordinary guys. I'm not sure that I could forgive myself if I left the city at the beginning.
Okay, running away.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I will. Maybe it sounds stupid, but I will always have that in my subconscious that I left. So.
And now in your subconscious, you have that you actually stood up. You stood up.
I stood up. Well, it was hard experience, but it was experience. I grew up overnight.
Yes.
I was
a boy and then a man.
A boy living with my parents, and I grew up overnight.
Yeah. And is there any wisdom that you would pass on to the 18-year-old of today who's growing up in here?
You should leave. That is wisdom. That is, that is a rational thing to do.
Yeah.
Leave.
All right. Well, listen, that was a great chat. Amer Mrz. That was fantastic. It was my first interview with somebody who is very, very capable of speaking English as a second language, despite what he said at the top of the show. I wish you all the best. Good luck with your new arrival.
Thank you.
Good luck with the History Museum project. I saw that it was fantastic. And here's hoping that Fabrica can win some awards at the international show.
We hope so.
Amer, thank you for being on my podcast.
Thank you.